My name is David Dellea. I lead a sports practice for consultancy Altman Solon. And it's a great pleasure to be here, not the least because we're in beautiful Paris, but most importantly because it's a great opportunity to be able to learn about the trajectory of Volleyball World. And who better to do that than Ugo Valensi, recently appointed August last year, right, as CEO of Volleyball World. And prior to that, Executive Director at Grand Slam Board for 5 years, and before that, CEO of Sport 5. And I dare to say also early stage career in consultancy, so which is great, of course. Ugo, just to get started, maybe it'd be great to, as you're new somewhat in the position, to know what have you learned that surprised you when you became CEO of Volleyball World about the business or about the sports?
Yeah, thank you, David, and hello, everyone. I think coming from the world of football and Olympic sports, and then for 5 years working for the Grand Slam tournaments in tennis, I was completely underestimating the actual size of what volleyball is today. I had sort of the bias of the Western geographies, let's say in France or the UK or Germany, where volleyball is, as a commercial sport is mostly behind the radar, below the radar. But I was completely surprised by the size. As a few examples, on social media, on Volleyball World, social media has 24 million followers, and that's roughly the same size as the ATP Tour and the WTA in tennis combined, right? So that just gives the existing appeal of the sport that really surprised me. The World Cup that was organized on the women's side in Thailand last September, we had 1 billion views of the championship in China on CCTV and Douyin, which are incredible numbers that I didn't see when I was working in tennis. I was in Japan a few weeks ago working with the biggest two free-to-air channels, TBS and Fuji, and the sport on broadcast for teenagers is the -- 2 sport. It's behind baseball, which is the #1 sport in Japan, but it's above football. Which again, I worked in the Asian Football Confederation for a few years. So these numbers really blew me away, understanding that there is an inherent, really strong appeal of the sport that does not reflect, especially in Western geographies, the commercial potential of the sport.
And indeed, so that's a perfect segue to my next question. And Volleyball World is really seen specifically in the broader Olympic movement as a bit of a trailblazer, right? As one of the first international federations that has actually taken the step of creating a separate commercial entity and then attracting external investment, in this case through CVC. So how have you seen, and I know somewhat externally, but now coming into your position, how have you seen the trajectory of commercialization of volleyball kind of before and after?
Yes, so the Volleyball World is a joint venture that was created 5 years ago between the International Volleyball Federation, the FIVB, and CVC Capital Partners. And so this manifested into the really acceleration of the commercial focus of the program. So basically the mandate of the company of Volleyball World is to commercialize and operate all of the international volleyball events, both indoor and beach volleyball. So we organize the World Cup, we organize the Volleyball Nations League, which is an international competition indoor that is organized between June and July in 15 countries around the world. And so the trajectory has been to really separate the politics of the sports, which have been the focus of the federation, from the commercialization of the sports. What has been tricky, I think, for all international federation is having to manage both, because there is a principle of universality for international federations. Their mission is to grow their sport towards 200 federations which are member. And my mandate and my focus is really to supercharge the commercialization of the properties, which is not going to be in 200 federations. It's going to be in a selection of top 10, 15 countries where we have to double down to grow the revenues, grow the profits, that is then coming back to grow the sport. So what has been done by separating, in terms of the governance, the politics from the commercialization, is really accelerate the decision making. So we've changed the calendar of the global calendar of the federation by creating the World Cup, both men and women, every 2 years instead of every 4, because there was very, very strong appeal to host these events, especially in Asia, where we have half of our fan base. I was mentioning that the sport is number 2 for teenagers in Japan. It's the number 3 sport in China. So you have a huge fan base, which with the purchasing power is increasing very fast. So there is a lot of growth in those areas. So by having the creation of that joint venture meant faster decision-making process, creating a very strong governance, changing the calendar, and having the ability as well to invest more disruptively into how we commercialize the sport. So we have created an OTT channel, which has roughly 300,000 paying subscribers present all over the world, which is a great tool for negotiation as well. We've just struck a deal in Thailand with Jazz Mono, who's one of the most prominent pay TV operator there that is broadcasting the Premier League as well. And that was on the back of the very strong creation of the OTT in the marketplace. So that's an example of optionality that we can use, which was likely not possible with the federation working on its own and focusing both on the politics and the commercialization of the sport.
That's very interesting. And what is always interesting is trying to see really the impact specifically that private equity has within federated sports. And the point that always comes out is, so to speak, the ability of not having politics come in the way of actually valorizing the sport. But if we leave the governance aside, maybe we can come back to that later. When you think about the straight commercialization, where do you think that actually additional investment has had the most impact? Was it on around the product itself, calendar, etc., or was it on the commercial side in terms of valorizing the product per se? And how do you think that both actually have evolved actually between?
I think it's definitely a combination of factors. The ability to move fast and changing the calendar to promote the commercialization of the product is huge. Investing into the product themselves and how you market them has been a great factor, but this has been on the back of the capability of Volleyball World to attract teams and people that are not actually endemic from the sport. The bias towards a lot of international federations is that they attract people that are coming from that specific sport, and then you basically lack some perspective. Then you don't want to change the format, you don't want to change the way it's been managed because it's always been this way. So by creating a commercial entity, you attract then commercially minded people that come from football, that come from tennis, that come from other sports, that can have other tools in order to think about how you develop the product in a certain way. The creation of an OTT means you have to invest into technology, you have to hire the right people, which again, having a commercial entity means that you can really focus on this and you attract the right kind of people to do this.
Now, going back to governance, one thing that always strikes me, specifically in federated sports, is, of course, the difficulty for CEOs such as yourself actually to manage operations. You have federations that are operating with boards of excess of 20 people, just to give you an idea, right? So it's very, very hard to manage. So how have you experienced the governance within Volleyball World in terms of really enabling you as a CEO to manage operations, take decisions, be challenged in the right way, and really move the sport forward?
Yeah, I think that's one of the main advantages of having private equity coming on board, is that you create strong governance, very strong commercial governance from the get-go. You're mentioning the size of the boards of international federations. The FIVB, the federation, has 50 board members. You can't have commercial discussions in depth with 50 people. It's just impossible. Volleyball World has a board of 9 people, both from the federation and from CVC. And the governance as well, first of all, is very clear, giving full empowerment to the team to actually drive the commercial outcome. And as well, being able to attract the right board members. On my board, I have the former CEO of the Welsh Rugby Union, who's been CEO of a publicly listed company. I have Simon Dellea, who's been a serial entrepreneur in the media and digital space. I have the chair of the board has been working for the IOC and has been the chief commercial officer for Formula One, for Bernie Ecclestone for a few years. His name is Michael Payne. All of these profiles means that they all add value to the conversations that we have, which allows me and then my team to really focus on what matters without being distracted by the overall politics of the sport.
And talking now about CVC, through GSG, right? So obviously, Volleyball World is part of a broader portfolio that includes tennis, right? But then also rugby, football, most prominently. So what is the impact of being part of a broader portfolio? So what is the kind of knowledge transfer, if I may say, or kind of other type of insights that you are able to benefit from at the receiving end of being part of this?
I think it's been really helpful. I've been quite close, especially on the tennis side, WTA Ventures, which is the commercial arm of the women's tour, as well as on the rugby side, and the CEOs. We are quite a close community there because we share the same challenges, and all of the sports organizations want to. They are competing for fan attention. They have the same levers to use, the same revenue drivers mostly to play with, and so there's a lot to learn at a very basic level. On the cost side and how you manage the suppliers, what are the innovative suppliers out there that we could use and benefit from. This has been really invaluable. Obviously, you can do that without being part of a group that with entities being invested into, and we obviously all do this on a regular basis. But being sort of cousins in that sense makes us closer, and so the conversations can go deeper into how we can generate cost synergies, how we can mutualize costs, possibly how we can generate revenue synergies. In the longer run, I think it's probably more challenging on the revenue than on the cost, but it's been really helpful. And I think on top of that, having a partner like CVC means we can have access to a portfolio of advisors that are committed to helping us succeed. As a practical example, I'm spending a lot of time with Michelle Wilson and George Barrios, who've been the former CEO of WWE. They have huge experience, obviously, in marketing and how to build global brands, and this has been invaluable for me.
Now, looking forward, Ugo, so if you were to pick a bit, what are your next big themes, actually, that you're addressing as part of the evolution, the development of Volleyball World? Which one are the most important? Sort of what wakes you up early morning and think, okay, these are the key things?
I think there's two things. There's continue to invest in the product. The great thing about our sport is, as I mentioned, the ingredients are there. There's massive, strong appeal that needs to be transferred into commercial revenues. But continue to invest in our product. As an example, the Volleyball Nations League indoor is a competition that has been existing only for the past 8 years. But it's one of the major growth commercially for us. And so what's the next step after the LA Games of the format, the competition? Should we have a second-tier competition sitting below it? So we can think about this sort of things without the existing sort of tradition that some other rights holders have to abide by. So that's the first thing, and that applies equally to both indoor and beach competitions. And the second thing is about really how to maximize the visibility of the competitions. We have contracted the World Cup for the next 4 years. We're discussing now about 2031 and 2033, how to maximize the visibility of the competition. So we enhance, the commercial appeal, especially on the sponsorship side. If we are able to say, this is the path in the next 10 years, and we will be present in China and Japan and Brazil, Italy, Poland, or Turkey, as an example, to quote a few very strong countries on the indoor side, then this clearly can help generate more sponsorship revenue that in turn will fuel the ecosystem.
So, and you were sharing before, right, that you're on the verge of moving to Lausanne, right? So in these very days. So that will obviously bring you much closer to the broader Olympic movement. So many federations, of course, based in Lausanne along the IOC. Any thought on the place of volleyball within the broader Olympic movement and the Olympic Games at large?
Yeah, the volleyball, if we combine both indoor and beach, is one of the most watched sports at the Olympic Games. So it's obviously very central to the Olympic program, and so the relationship with the IOC are very strong. We are working with them now to create 3 events on the beach volleyball side for what is called the Olympic Qualifying Series for the LA Games that will be organized a few months before LA. So the relationship is very strong. I'm trying to sort of look away from this because commercially, developing the World Cup or developing the Volleyball Nations League or developing beach has to be in a way separated from the Olympic rhythm, right? The Olympics are obviously a great platform, but the Olympics revenues are going to the IOC, not to us, right? Indirectly, they're coming back to us through the funding that the IOC provides, but we have to create a fan narrative that goes beyond the Olympic Games that happen, obviously, only once every 4 years.
So as you are packing and soon unpacking your, your moving boxes in Lausanne, any final message that you have or advice you would say based on your experience now within Volleyball World and your prior career to other federations that are going to be your new neighbors?
I think that private equity is not a magical solution because it can clearly help unlock a way to manage the governance. But as well, the federations can change the governance if they want to without necessarily having external investment, right? The investment has to serve a specific purpose. And so sometimes it can be very useful, sometimes not. We've been talking a lot these past few years about sports as an asset class for investments. I think it's a bit too generic. I think that there's maybe great investments in sports and a situation where external capital can provide value, but it's not a magical solution. So, I just want us collectively to think about that.
Ugo, thank you very much.
Thank you.